Hello everyone. Thank you for clicking on my channel. Here, we dive into family conflicts and the challenges that come with them. If you've ever experienced something similar, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to like the video to support the channel's growth. If there are any mistakes or areas for improvement, feel free to share your feedback in the comments. I truly appreciate you being here and listening. Now let me set the stage.
My name is Melody Reynolds, eldest daughter of the founding family behind GRW Industries. I gave nearly 3 decades of my life to the company, thinking loyalty and blood still meant something. But 3 days before my father's will was set to grant me full ownership rights, I was fired. No warning, no family meeting, just a sealed envelope on a desk and a cold glance from my cousin David, the newly appointed CEO. That's when I realized this wasn't a family business anymore. It was a battlefield. David didn't even look me in the eye when he handed me the envelope. Nothing personal, Melody. Just restructuring, he said smoothly, leaning back in my father's old chair, the one I had expected to inherit. Restructuring. That word tasted like acid. For 29 years I had been GRW's silent engine, the one who stayed late, who kept the legal department afloat, who signed off on every compliance report and investigated every red flag. When others in the family fought for spotlight roles and padded titles, I handled the messes behind closed doors. I didn't need credit. I needed stability. Legacy. My father's legacy. But Dad died last year and everything started to shift. David had always been the charming one. Ivy League educated, fast-talking, sleek as a blade. When the board, most of them distant relatives or old family allies, chose him as interim CEO for modernization, I didn't object. I thought it was temporary. I thought the will would settle everything. But David moved fast. Too fast. He cut departments, shuffled leadership, changed auditors. He brought in consultants who spoke in buzzwords and balance sheets. I started seeing discrepancies in reports. Small at first but multiplying. When I raised concerns, he'd smile that politician's smile and say, "You worry too much, Mel." And now here we were. Fired on a Friday afternoon. 3 days before the will's transition clause activated. A clause that would have transferred 25% voting power to me and named me permanent head of compliance with oversight over executive operations. My father's final safeguard. That wasn't coincidence. That was precision. As I walked out of the boardroom, head high, envelope in hand, I passed portraits of our family lining the hallway. My grandfather breaking ground on the original GRW factory in 1957. My parents at the opening of the second plant in Colorado. Even a photo of me, younger, smiling awkwardly at the company's 25th anniversary celebration. We had built this. And now they were trying to erase me from it. At home I didn't cry. I made tea, sat at my desk and opened the envelope. It was a severance agreement, thick with legal jargon, offering me 3 months' pay in exchange for silence. Non-disclosure, non-compete, waiver of all future claims, including any challenge to internal governance or my father's estate. Clever, ruthless. They weren't just cutting me out of the company. They were cutting me out of the family. But they'd underestimated me. My father used to say, "Melody doesn't shout. She documents." And I had. Every email, every odd financial report, every memo I'd sent, every response I didn't receive. They thought they were getting rid of a liability. They had just provoked a reckoning. That night I went down to the basement. Not to sulk, to search. Behind a locked cabinet, buried under old photo albums and faded shareholder reports, was a black fireproof safe. It hadn't been opened in years. The key hung from a chain I wore on my neck since my father died. Inside the safe were 3 things. Flash drive, a leather-bound ledger, and a sealed letter, addressed to me in my father's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Melody, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. I always knew the vultures would circle once I was gone. That's why I left breadcrumbs only you would know how to follow. Trust your instincts. Protect the company. Protect our name. Ed. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and spent the next 5 hours uncovering exactly what David had been hiding. Not just creative accounting, this was premeditated fraud. Asset transfers to shell corporations. Delayed vendor payments to fake quarterly growth. Internal audits overwritten with ghost data. And worst of all, the paper trail didn't start with David. Started 5 years ago. With the board. David had simply accelerated the decay. They thought I'd never find it. They forgot who trained me. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I began printing. Stacks of files. Thousands of pages. Every falsified balance sheet. Every backdated quality report. Every email showing collusion. The office smelled like ink and reckoning. This wasn't about getting my job back. This was about burning down the rot before it consumed what my family built. By sunrise, I had 3 hard copy sets of everything. One for me. One for my attorney. And one that would go straight to the Securities and Exchange Commission. But before I made the call, I needed to test something. I sent a single anonymous email to the GRW internal legal team. No name. Just numbers, dates, and 2 lines of text. You knew. Check line 14 of the March 2022 audit. By noon, the boardroom was in chaos. Phones were ringing. Legal counsel was panicking. David was locked in his office. And me. I was just getting started. By the end of the day, I had something more dangerous than revenge. I had leverage. Buried in that flash drive weren't just numbers, they were stories. Fake vendors created by board members to siphon off funds. Private jets logged as client travel. Bonuses paid to executives based on inflated performance reports. All tied to names I'd known since childhood. Uncles, cousins, even my godmother. This wasn't just about David anymore. This was systemic betrayal, rooted deep in the bloodline. For decades, my family wore the GRW name like a crown. We funded community centers, hospitals, college scholarships. But behind closed doors, a darker legacy had taken shape, one of greed, power hoarding, and silence bought with golden parachutes. And worst of all, I had been part of it. I'd signed off on reports I didn't question hard enough. I'd believed the strategic adjustments were just that, not fabricated growth. I had looked away, trusting the family more than my own instinct. Till now. I spent the next 48 hours like a woman possessed. I color-coded files, tagged timelines, mapped email chains. What emerged was damning. A 5-year-long timeline of financial manipulation, involving at least 4 board members and 2 external partners. David didn't build this empire of lies. He just polished it, made it run faster, and now he was its perfect fall guy. I didn't want to destroy GRW. I wanted to save it from itself. But doing that meant exposing the family name, and in doing so, burning bridges I could never cross again. Before taking the next step, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Gregory Santos. My father's former CFO, now working for the SEC. He answered on the first ring. Melody. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I have something you need to see, I said. Actually, a lot of things. After a long pause, he replied. If what I think you have is real, it's not just GRW that's in trouble. It's half the investment firms tied to your board. You ready for that storm? I looked at the documents, the signatures, the names, the blood ties. I was born in that storm, I said. Now I'm bringing the lightning. The next morning, I walked into the federal building downtown with a briefcase full of truth. The kind of truth that doesn't just hurt. It reshapes power. What I didn't know then was how deep the rot truly ran, and that the people most desperate to silence me weren't sitting in boardrooms. They were sitting across from me at Thanksgiving. And they were willing to do whatever it took to keep the family secrets buried. They always say blood is thicker than water, but in my family, blood had been diluted by stocks, silence, and secrets. The moment my files reached the SEC, the phone started ringing. Not just David. Not just HR. Family. And Clara called first. Melody, sweetheart, let's not make this messy. We're family. We can talk this through. She hadn't returned my calls in 3 years, not since the reading of Dad's will. Suddenly, she was all maternal warmth and baked cookies over the phone. I hung up without a word. Then came Uncle Richard, always the voice of reason. You don't want to destroy what your father built, do you? What your mother bled for? Just come to the next board meeting. Let's keep this in-house. I nearly laughed. In-house was exactly where the rot festered. By Tuesday it wasn't just whispers, it was war. The GRW board split right down the middle. Half wanted a full internal investigation and emergency leadership reshuffle. The other half, the old guard, wanted me silenced, discredited, buried in lawsuits and public smear campaigns. And leading that charge, David, course. He held a press conference, smooth, rehearsed, painting himself as a reformer who'd inherited a mess and tried to keep the company afloat. Then he dropped the bomb. Unfortunately, a disgruntled former employee, who also happens to be a distant relative, has chosen to retaliate after being let go for performance issues. Performance issues. I'd had 29 years of spotless reviews, commendations, bonuses I never even cashed. But it didn't matter. The seed had been planted, a whisper campaign aimed at undermining me before the real investigation took hold. That night, I received an envelope slipped under my door. No return address. Inside, a printed email thread between 2 board members from 4 years ago, discussing how to contain Melody before she becomes a problem. No signatures, but I recognized the writing style. One of them had switched sides. The family was fracturing. Elizabeth, my daughter, called in tears. Mom, Uncle David just gave an interview saying you forged financial records. That you're bitter about losing control of the company. I stayed calm. That's what people do when they're scared, honey. They lie louder. The truth was, they weren't fighting me because I was wrong. They were fighting me because I was right and I had proof. What hurt wasn't their betrayal. I had braced for that. What stung was that they were willing to burn down the entire legacy just to keep their names clean. But if they wanted war, I'd show them what a Reynolds was really made of. The storm had passed. Not because it calmed down, but because I walked through it and refused to fall. 2 board members resigned. 1 fled the country. David Langston was escorted out of GRW headquarters in handcuffs. A man who had once laughed in my face, now silenced by federal charges and flashing cameras. And me. I stood in the very same boardroom where I had once been fired, but this time on my terms. Across the table sat Patricia Donovan, now interim CEO, along with the company's new legal counsel and 2 remaining board members. No suits, no fake smiles. Just paperwork, clean, clear and firm. Patricia slid the final document toward me. This reinstates your employment retroactively, confirms full pension rights, and awards additional compensation for everything. I didn't read the numbers. I didn't have to. I wasn't there for the money. This isn't just a gesture, Patricia added quietly. We want you to lead the new Ethics and Compliance Division. You won't be reporting to the board. You'll be watching them. I stared at her. After all this, they wanted me to come back. To fix what they broke. For a moment I thought of my father, the way his hands moved over blueprints, the way he used to say, "We don't just build factories, Mel. We build trust. Trust. That's what we lost." "I won't return to fix the company," I said softly. "But I'll help rebuild the principle it was meant to stand on." So I did. I declined the full-time role. But I agreed to consult with regulators and help design a new framework. Not just for GRW, but for other companies like it. We built anonymous reporting lines, independent audits, whistleblower protection protocols. Real change. Quiet change. The kind that doesn't make headlines but rewires the foundation. And as for the family, some still won't speak to me. Others sent quiet apologies in the form of forwarded articles, or birthday cards signed R. I don't need their words. They made their choices. Made mine. One weekend months later, I sat on the porch of my new lakeside cabin, the house Thomas always dreamed of retiring to. Elizabeth was inside, helping the twins bake cookies. Laughter floated through the screen door. "Do you regret it, Mom?" she asked suddenly, joining me with 2 cups of tea. "Spending all those years at GRW. Knowing how it ended." I looked out at the lake, at the sunlight dancing on water like memory. "No," I said. "I don't regret doing what was right. I regret that I was the only one who did." She nodded slowly. "You weren't, Mom. Not anymore." And in that moment I knew. This wasn't just the end of a battle. It was the beginning of a legacy. One not written in inheritance papers, but in integrity, courage, and the quiet power of standing your ground. The company survived. The family fractured. But I was still here. And for the first time in decades, I was free.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another thrilling story. See you in the next one.